quack, quack, quack.
Musicians are overcoming the tyranny of EDM with the power of rock and roll in No Straight Roads. Can a rock duo survive with their instruments out of sync? The look of the game is reminiscent of older 3D games from Double Fine, like Psychonauts, but with a brighter color palette. The 3D cutscenes actually look pretty good if you're into that cartoony PS2 era style, but that means the graphics also look dated. The visuals are varied with a different art style depending on the type of cutscene, switching between 3D graphics, 2D character portraits with indiscriminately moving mouths, and occasionally animated 2D cutscenes. It all looks fine independently, but feels inconsistent when the game constantly cycles between the different styles.
Vinyl City is a colorful neon futurescape with stacked houses and small crowds of people sprinkled throughout, making it feel like a city, just not a busy city. The fighting segments all have visually unique environments, but they're quite empty. Overall, we thought the game looked good in a nostalgic way. No Straight Roads is a music-themed 3D hack-and-slash action game. Every description of this game uses the term rhythm game, but we really couldn't see why. Enemies might attack you rhythmically, but their relationship to the music is arbitrary. There's nothing special about the specific point in a song an enemy attacks, and it doesn't really matter when a dozen enemies are attacking at all the other points. Except for dodging a specific attack, there's nothing players do that is dictated by the music.
Gameplay is split between limited exploration of the city and a forward progression of fights leading up to a boss fight. The city acts as a hub that opens up as you defeat bosses. Throughout the city are power cells that you can collect to power up parts of the city, helping your band gain more fans, and stickers which give you a small temporary boost in fights. At first, it feels that unlocking Double Jump will open up the possibilities to explore, but the city is full of invisible walls that halt your exploration as soon as you start. You'll quickly realize that the city is a winding hallway with the occasional ledge that you're meant to climb up to, and countless ledges that you're not. When you're ready to fight the next boss, you first have to pass through a series of gates that you unlock by defeating enemies. Enemy variety is limited to a few different robots with basic attacks, which you're encouraged to dodge by jumping or dashing away. Occasionally, the game will provide a limited number of projectiles that are used to attack specific enemies with no aiming required. If you need more projectiles, you'll have to wait until the game spawns more. You progress through sets of enemies and occasional platforming until you get to the boss.
Bosses are fought in stages, and there is little to no guidance on your objective in each stage. Generally, it seems that you need to hit or otherwise interact with objects that spawn projectiles, and then use these projectiles to hit the boss, all while avoiding attacks. Boss attacks often take up large parts of the screen, making it difficult or impossible to avoid them. A lot of attacks will stun lock you if you get hit once, triggering a spiral of death as you get hit by every subsequent attack. Luckily, death isn't the end of the world, as you have the option to continue right where you died, but this will guarantee a lower score at the end of the fight. Playing music near certain objects in a boss fight causes them to do something. The ever-present mystery of the game is figuring out how anything you're doing is actually progressing the stage. We had to assume that powering these objects up was beneficial, with absolutely no guidance on what that benefit was. After defeating a boss, you're graded on your performance and rewarded with fans for your band, which ultimately act as experience points for character upgrades. You also gain access to new special attacks, which you can equip or trade out in your sewer-based headquarters. The headquarters is a menu for receiving your next objective, upgrading characters, and changing your special attacks and temporary buffs. When you're ready to leave, you're back on the same path to do it all over again with the next boss.
All the stages of gameplay are full of odd quirks that make the game a chore. X is used for jumping, interacting with objects, and reviving, so good luck dodging attacks if the other player is down. The characters move very quickly by default, exacerbating the issues with platforming and the camera. Hit detection is broken, leaving your characters flailing their arms right next to an enemy, doing no damage, but taking plenty of damage from other enemies off-screen. The two characters play slightly differently, which amounts to one character taking 3 times as many hits to defeat an enemy. It seems at first that the game is designed with co-op in mind. Players can choose which member of the rock duo they want to play as, and both of the characters are present throughout the game, even in single player. But the failures of the co-op implementation surface immediately when you begin to control your individual characters. Not only does co-op fail to make up for any of the issues with gameplay, it presents even bigger issues. There's no split screen, and the camera doesn't care that there are 2 players. In the hub world, the camera follows the first player, and they have control over rotating it, so player 2 is only on screen if player 1 is looking at them. This essentially takes all control from the second player, as they are not able to freely move around the environment.
In the combat portions of the game, there's no camera control, and the camera shifts uncontrollably to follow either player. So oftentimes, one or both players are not even on screen to see where they're going, what they're doing, or how they're dying. The already weak platforming turns into a cycle of repeatedly falling until the game pushes you forward with a lucky respawn, as the broken camera makes it impossible to judge depth, and the players act like invisible walls to each other. The camera is a little more forgiving in single player, with only one character to focus on. The only real addition to co-op is the ability to revive another player, but even death is worse in co-op. The camera issues make it difficult to recognize if your character is dead. The time it takes to die after being knocked down ranges from a few seconds to instantaneous, and the menu that opens to continue or restart comes up immediately after. In one boss fight, there were multiple occasions where we almost restarted the fight accidentally, because one of us was still attempting to play when the other one suddenly died. By the game's clock, boss fights took 20 to 30 minutes, although they felt even longer. The story of No Straight Roads is actually some decent cheesy fun. It's not great, but it seems to be the only part of the game with any effort put into it. It doubles down on the rock and roll theme, which is impressive, but it does get heavy-handed in expressing its views on other music. There's a surprising emphasis on character development, although the character arcs don't make much sense in the end. Ultimately, the story would be passable if it was applied to a playable game.
Multiple times, controls locked up in one way or another. Sometimes the jump button didn't work, no matter how far a character moved from an interactable object. Other times, a player was stuck initiating an interaction over and over again, or stuck in some animation, unable to do anything else. Usually this fixed itself over time, but in one instance we had to reload a checkpoint to continue. At least the game never crashed.
It might seem that this game does everything wrong, and that's because everything the game does right can be counted on one hand. The humor is decent, the music can be catchy, and the visuals are pretty cool at times, especially in the 3D cutscenes. But where the game fails is in everything else. The gameplay is weak. The co-op implementation is completely broken. No Straight Roads isn't a good single player, but it's a terrible two-player game. On top of all that, the game is $40 at full price. If you value your time and your money, this is one we would not recommend.
Come on, May. Let's go home.
All right. Sayonara.